The Peripheral opens in 2032 in the eastern part of the United States. A girl named Flynn walked up to her brother, Burton. The man often lived in a unique camp he created around their house. Burton's hobby lately is playing with his VR device. It turns out he will take part in a big competition. If Burton manages to win this match, he will get money that they can use to treat their mother. Later, Burton gives his VR device to Flynn so that the girl can win levels for him. In the game, Flynn takes over his brother's avatar and gives directions to other members to fight the enemy with better strategies. Sure enough, they won the level in just a few seconds. Then Flynn found the important map she had been looking for. After that, Flynn went to work in 3D printing. At this place, several of Burton's friends delivered a package containing the latest VR headset from a Colombia company called Milagros Cold Iron. They gave the headset for free, but Flynn had to scan her eyes first to confirm that the item had been received. When he got home, Burton explained that he had been asked to test this new VR game because he had managed to reach level 100 in another game. Because this job promised decent pay, Flynn agreed to help Burton install the headset. So Flynn closed her eyes while counting down. At the count of 10, Flynn finds himself in the Easy Ice avatar riding a motorbike. Suddenly, there was a voice that welcomed his arrival and warned that Flynn would experience pain in this game. However, the girl had no other choice. She had to do whatever she was told to earn money. The voice gave her directions to reach Buckingham Palace. Once there, Flynn had to say a secret code to enter another room and do several tricks to test the game. Then Flynn went to the park where a company known as the Research Institute, RI, was holding a party. Again, the voice tells Flynn to seduce and convince Mariel to take Easy Ice home with her. When Flynn started to chat, Mariel suddenly stopped the game to get some privacy. The woman was fascinated by Flynn's words. Not long after, they left with the help of a robot valet who drove the car. However, the voice warned again that the robot could end everything if something went wrong. Mariel and Flynn were enjoying their closeness, but suddenly, the voice came back and said that Flynn had to take the glass vial and open it right near Mariel's nose. Not long after, the woman fainted and the robot driver immediately attacked Flynn. Finally, the voice ordered Flynn to drive the car onto a narrow road. She saw a secret door between the walls, then carefully entered the place. For the first time, Flynn meets Alita, the figure behind the mysterious voice who said that they would continue this game the next day. Flynn cut ties with the game, and Burton immediately told his sister that the company liked Flynn and was offering her more money. Back in the present, Flynn goes to a bar to buy medicine for her mother from illegal sellers. One of them threatened to do something unpleasant if Flynn didn't have enough money. Their conversation is overheard by Kinnair, a disabled man who ultimately helps Flynn obtain the drug. Then, the group of delinquents returned to the bar and met their boss, Corbell. The man got angry and beat one of them because he failed to get enough money from Flynn. Sometime later, Flynn reconnects with the simulation world. This time, she woke up in the operating room, and Alita told her that she would not be able to leave the simulation again without her permission. Finally, the surgeons began the process of removing Flynn's avatar's eyes and replacing them with Mariel's. Then, the scene changes to when Flynn wakes up in the car with Alita. They went to a luxurious building, and using Mariel's eyes, they managed to enter and arrived at a room with an inverted pyramid hanging from the ceiling. At that place, Alita pressed Flynn's head so that the sensor in front of them identified Mariel's cornea, which now belonged to Flynn. Suddenly, a man named Daniel appears, and Alita asks Flynn to stop the man before Daniel kills them. Finally, Flynn managed to get one of her hands out and fight the man. Alita used this opportunity to escape. Now, the man turned his attention to Flynn and shot a sonic weapon in the neck, which caused the girl to wake up in the real world and state that she no longer wanted to play the simulation. Meanwhile, on the city ring route, a police officer spotted two suspicious cars. However, when he followed him, the car suddenly disappeared. Out of curiosity, the police got out of the patrol car to investigate the surroundings. However, one of the foreign men suddenly pointed a gun and told him to stand in the middle of the road. Then the man beat the policeman until he was unconscious. The next day, Flynn got a call from Wilf. A man warned her about an imminent danger and suggested that he return to playing the simulation. However, this time, Flynn hung up the phone. Something strange happened in the evening when the girl was closing the shop. Wilf's voice came back through the system, and the printer displayed a message that Flynn was being hunted. The girl rushed home to meet her older brother, who was hanging out with his friends. Flynn said that currently their family is in danger. Using a drone, they could see a group of armed people approaching their location. Flynn and her family rushed into the house to take their mother to the basement. Meanwhile, Burton's friends hack the hunter's drone and connect their body implants to the drone to monitor the surroundings. After taking weapons, Burton and his group infiltrated the forest and began attacking the enemy. Thanks to their expertise, the enemy could only do a little because Burton's team was equipped with implants connected to drones, so they knew the enemy's location. Meanwhile, the power in the house suddenly goes out and a man chases Flynn. At the same time, the enemy manages to hack in and summon help to attack Burton's team again. When Burton's team starts to run out of ammunition, Connor comes to their aid. After all the enemies are killed, Burton and his team agree that Flynn will return to using the headset to gather important information. A few moments later, Flynn enters the simulation world and wakes up in her own body. Wilf arrives and explains that this is not a game. The headset transferred her thoughts into a robot called Peripheral in the year 2099. The girl was surprised when she noticed the surrounding location. Many giant statues are decorating the city of London, but strangely, there are no people around. Then Wilf gives a newspaper stating that Ella Fisher will die in 4 weeks, starting from today in Flynn's world. Unexpectedly, Wilf offered a deal. If Flynn helps him find Alita, he will give her medicine that can save Flynn's mother's life. Soon enough, Flynn returns to the present and rushes off into town. She goes with Connor to get the medicine as Wilf had promised. Meanwhile, Burton and his friends collect the enemy's bodies and bury them. This time, Flynn re-entered the simulation world and connected to a building in the Notting Hill area. It was at this place that Wilf introduced Flynn to his boss, Lev, as well as 2 other technicians named Ash and Ossian. Wilf explains that every time they take an action that affects the past, there will be a new impact that is different from what should have happened. This is known as a parallel timeline, and this moment of change occurs when the main timeline splits with a new parallel timeline. This is the reason Wilf's group is hunting Alita. The woman might move if they don't catch her immediately. Apart from that, Flynn was disappointed when she found out that the medicine given to her mother only had a 57% success rate. Therefore, Flynn negotiated with Wilf's group that she would look for Alita seriously as long as Flynn's mother was completely healed. Meanwhile, a policeman, who is familiarly known as Tommy, suddenly stopped when he saw a cup of coffee floating in the air. Turns out it was a disguise. The man also found shell casings and went to see Burton. Not long after, the young man managed to identify the type of bullet, but he avoided it as if nothing had happened. At the same time, Flynn arrives and tells her older brother that people from the future will send $250,000 via their Uncle Leon by winning the lottery. Sometime later, Flynn looked for references about Milagros and Wilf, but needed help finding information. At the same time, a strange incident happened to Flynn. The girl's fingers refused to press the mouse as if her body refused to find out about them. Precisely in the middle of the night, the girl woke up because she heard a strange sound. Without delay, Flynn contacted Burton and then went down to the first floor to find a suspicious person who turned out to be her mother. The woman looked healthy and was looking for dinner. Flynn's mother immediately hugged her with a happy expression. After that, the next scene shows Corbell using a VR set to hire a woman virtually. However, Daniel suddenly appears and offers some money to get rid of Burton and Flynn. At first, Corbell thought the offer was just a joke, but then he quit the game. Moments later, Corbell received a message stating that he had received $2.5 million in his bank account. Now the offer was real, and the man agreed. Arriving at work, Flynn finds Burton and his friends collecting more weapons. It turns out that the young man used the lottery prize money to buy the shop. Not long after, Flynn enters the simulation and shares with Lev's group everything that happened to Alita. They engage in a conversation about Mariel and also Corbell, a man hired to harm the Flynn family. Therefore, Flynn decides to go back and tell Burton all this. Meanwhile, Wilf visits his childhood home and meets his mother, who says that Alita was last seen in the St. Louis area, James some time ago. At the same time, in the present, Burton meets Corbell and reveals that he already knows the middle-aged man's secret mission. Then, Burton offered a choice, one of which was that Corbell would receive $20,000 every week if the man let the Fisher family live in peace. Meanwhile, another option is for Burton and his fellow Marines not to hesitate to end Corbell and his group if this man dares to disturb their lives. Finally, Corbell ended the meeting by shaking hands and agreeing to accept the offer of money. They didn't realize that Tommy was watching them from a distance. Back to Flynn, this time, she manages to return to the simulation world and appears in the car with Wilf. They circled Buckingham Palace to trace Flynn's footsteps the night before. Before they split up, Wilf connected each other's sensory access so that Flynn could see and hear everything that Wilf saw and heard. Soon, police robots start following Flynn. At the same time, Wilf realized that Flynn's robot was not registered and created an alibi, as if this robot was an intermediary with his girlfriend, who lived far from that area. Luckily, the police believed the story and asked Flynn to leave the system immediately. Meanwhile, Daniel's boss and Research Institute boss, Shirais, met one of the researchers at his company, Grace, at the beekeeping park. They enjoy a meal together and engage in conversation about Alita's whereabouts. Instead of getting an answer, Grace tells her that Alita already knows the secret about the parallel world. Of course, this confession annoyed Shirais. The woman was no less cunning. She had added chemicals to Grace's drink, which made her sweat smell like bee pheromones. So the bees immediately attacked her. The scene shifts to Flynn and Wilf, who are still looking for clues about where Alita lives. Not long after, they managed to find it and immediately went to their destination. This is where Flynn opened the walls, as taught by Alita. This place was very messy, indicating that someone else had stopped by before. Flynn saw the same broken clock as his. Wilf took the initiative to change the clock to equalize their time. Then they found the operating room where Alita had replaced Flynn's eyeball. In that place, there are two broken robots and a house diorama complete with statues of Burton and his friends. Then Wilf took samples from the robot and the implant that Alita had accidentally removed, and they rushed towards the main door. But suddenly, someone came in and beat them with unique tools, so the mysterious person managed to defeat them in a short time. Luckily, Flynn managed to defeat the robot with a tool given to her by Wilf. It turns out Shirais sent the robot. A flashback shows the city of London, which was destroyed when Wilf and Alita were abandoned as street children. One day, Wilf was curious about the presence of a van that was distributing food. The little boy was determined to investigate the car, even though Alita had warned him. When Wilf gets closer, it turns out it's all some kind of hologram. Not long after, two officers in hazmat suits chased and managed to arrest them both. Back in 2099, Wilf gives the samples and implants to Lev as if he already knows everything and states that Alita will not survive long without them. Meanwhile, Flynn has returned to the present. She felt unwell because blood was seen seeping out of her eyeballs, and her hands were gripping again, and she couldn't control them, but it all felt like a hallucination. Not long after, Burton came, and suddenly Flynn convulsed very violently. So Burton immediately rushed his sister to the hospital. They met with Dr. Didi. The woman's doctor diagnosed that Flynn was experiencing tonic-clonic seizures without side effects. This could be influenced by Flynn's habit of frequently using a headset. Therefore, the doctor will carry out additional examinations if Flynn still experiences the same symptoms, and then advise her to stop using the headset. A few moments later, they returned home, and Burton discussed this incident with the group. The young man wants one of his groups to replace Flynn when she enters the simulation world, and Connor is interested in taking Flynn's place. Back in the future, Shirais makes a new robot with Daniel's face to quickly get information about Lev's group. Sometime later, the woman goes to see Lev and accuses him of stealing something that belonged to her. Instead of getting recognition, the man acts as if he is not involved in the problem. Feeling annoyed, Charisse reminds Lev about all the rules that apply in their world, where every violation that occurs will result in consequences and losses for Klept and Rai. At the same time, Connor gets into Flynn's robot and creates chaos. Meanwhile, Flynn is watching a documentary of her childhood and is shocked by Wilf's appearance, who tells her that Connor has replaced him in the simulation world. However, Flynn doesn't pay much attention to this incident. The girl actually said that Lev's name was related to the Mafia syndicate that caused her entire family to die, but Wilf manages to dismiss all this news. When he returns to the simulation world, Wilf meets Lev and tells him that Flynn already knows everything. Instead of being surprised, Lev didn't seem to mind the news and explained his reasons for hiring Alita. He wants to experiment with a parallel world, one of which is by hiring a hitman to end her family in another parallel timeline. Back to Flynn, who still insists on entering the simulation world. This time, she was assisted by Burton and his group, who tried to hack the headset. Flynn manages to survive in the simulation and engages in conversation with Ash. The woman invited Flynn to go to the cemetery and meet Wilf. There, they saw several mysterious objects floating. The object represents a phase of the apocalypse called Jackpot. Starting from the first phase, it shows a total power outage that will occur in 2039 in the United States, and then spread to all parts of the world. The second phase occurred in 2041 when a blood plague hit the whole world due to being infected by the filovirus. The third phase is an environmental disaster ranging from crop failure, famine, and drought to a peak of 7 billion people dying in 4 decades. Then, the final phase depicts a domestic terror attack, namely the nuclear explosion in Spring Creek, North Carolina. A flashback shows Alita again convincing Grace to divulge some of her research. The woman took Alita to an inverted pyramid room, which was considered a god because it had access to several simulations that carried out research in various fields. One of them is the Behavior Modification Department. There, they formed a dummy company that collaborated with the military and gave implants to soldiers for the specific purpose of modification. The implant affects the performance of the hypothalamus gland in the brain. Then, in the footage, one of the soldiers can be seen helping a dog trapped in a roll of iron wire. A few moments later, they came out of the room and met Mariel. Back in the present, a former hitman named Robert O'Connell tries to live an everyday life with his new identity as Bob. However, one morning, the man received a mysterious package containing a sonic weapon. At the same time, the man also received a call from the robot Daniel offering $10 million to kill Flynn's family. Even though he initially refused, Robert was forced to accept this deal because he didn't want his daughter's safety to be threatened. The scene shifts to a bowling entertainment venue. This time, Robert met an old friend named Frank. They engage in conversation, and Robert accuses Frank of leaking his identity to Daniel. Frank explained that he and his family were also threatened if they did not provide information about Robert's whereabouts. Robert immediately went to his car after shooting Frank. He left at the same time as Daniel, who provided information about the whereabouts of the Flynn family. However, one of Frank's sons appears and opens fire on Robert. The following day, Flynn underwent several medical tests due to a bacterial infection in her brain that could affect the visual system. Therefore, Flynn underwent a lumbar puncture to collect body fluids for further examination. Meanwhile, Robert stopped his car on the side of the road, waiting for Flynn to come out of the clinic. However, Flynn's friend, Billy, met Robert first and insisted on helping the man, even though Robert had repeatedly refused. Not long after, Burton and Flynn's car stopped when they saw Billy offering help. Swiftly, Robert took the sonic weapon, and luckily, Flynn recognized the gun, so they managed to dodge in time. After that, Billy paralyzed Robert. Sometime later, Tommy arrives to arrest Robert. Previously, he also asked Flynn about sonic weapons, but the girl pretended not to know. On the way to the police station, Robert told about an offer he accepted because the people who hired him wanted to solve the problem without revealing his true identity. However, suddenly, their car hit something invisible and caused an accident. Meanwhile, Flynn returns to the simulation world to meet Shirais at the Research Institute. They have a conversation in which Shirais suspects Flynn has stolen something from her, but in reality, Flynn has not done so. Conflict ensues between them. They are involved in a very fierce battle until Flynn manages to defeat Shirais. A flashback shows Burton and his team in the Texas outback in 2028. While on duty, they find a dog trapped in barbed wire. Burton reminded them of the enemy's strategy of often using wounded animals as bait. All the team members were hesitant to help the dog, but unlike Connor, he immediately approached the poor dog and cut the barbed wire without realizing there was a bomb. As a result, there was an explosion that left his body disfigured. It turned out that all of this was a nightmare that Connor had never forgotten. Meanwhile, Tommy continues to try to investigate the accident that happened to him some time ago, but his digital files have been blocked. His boss then asked Tommy to take time off to rest. However, Tommy saw a pair of shoes that looked like those at the accident scene when he entered the toilet. This raises suspicions that they deliberately kicked Tommy out of the investigation mission. Back in the future, Flynn finally finds out the reason why people shunned him. Apparently, it was just a visual effect created by Rai to make the city look busier. They also prepared to meet the creator of the Alita robot, where Wilf obtained this information from samples he took some time ago. This time, they entered the butcher shop and met the seller. Flynn engages in conversation with the man to check the robot's body and perhaps replace some parts with better ones. The salesman offered titanium nails as a secret weapon. The peak occurred when the meat seller carried out an eye scan examination. Flynn was again involved in a conversation that sparked a dispute. Unexpectedly, the meat seller attacked Flynn. Luckily, the girl was very alert, so she was able to dodge every attack. After the meat seller lost, Wilf took advantage of this situation to ask where Alita was. They provided information that the woman was collaborating with a revolutionary group known as Neoprim. Meanwhile, another scene shows Lev's technicians making a robot for Connor and Burton to enter the simulation world. In the present, Corbell and his wife are preparing dinner while an unconscious Robert sits in the chair next to him. When the man regained consciousness, he found an electric shock collar around his neck and attempted to attack Corbell. But suddenly, his body stiffened. He couldn't attack Corbell because of the shock collar. Meanwhile, Tommy went to see Burton and told him about the strange chronology that had happened to him shortly before the accident occurred. However, Burton suspects this will happen and makes Tommy increasingly suspicious that his boss, Sheriff Jackman, is involved in Robert's case. Sure enough, at the same time, Corbell went to the sheriff's office to see the video footage from Tommy's car. The scene shifts to Corbell's house. Robert was sitting in a room with Mary, Corbell's wife. The man took the paperweight while Mary was distracted. Soon, Robert pretended to be interested in Mary's story about her magnificent aquarium. But suddenly, Robert destroyed the aquarium so that they were both electrocuted and then fell unconscious. It turns out that Robert did this on purpose to kill Mary's shock necklace as well. After that, Robert suddenly opened his eyes again. It turns out he didn't die from an electric attack of that magnitude. Back in the future, Ash realizes that a doctor is monitoring Flynn's health due to finding a bacterial infection in his body. At the same time, they were suddenly visited by Inspector Ainsley, who was in charge of investigating Daniel's death and was forced to let the woman in. Inspector Ainsley explains that she could have arrested Wilf because she knew where he was at the scene of Daniel's death and threatened him with the death penalty. Back in the past, Burton's team receives a message from the future asking them to come to the simulated world. However, only Burton and Connor got this opportunity. Now they start their adventure and meet Inspector Ainsley. In the future, Burton and his team arrive at a metropolitan police training facility called the Zoo. In an instant, Ainsley's hands made the rubble in front of them turn into a tall building. Ainsley asks Beatrice to accompany Burton and Connor into the building to test their new bodies. Beatrice explained several rules, including that they had to keep fighting until they reached the roof of the building. Now, they make it to the roof, and Beatrice gives them the final test. The three of them must fight to the end until only one person can survive. Even though Burton and Connor cooperate reasonably in fighting, more than their strength is needed to defeat Beatrice. So, they were successfully dropped from the roof of the building. Meanwhile, Ainsley tells Flynn that she has investigated the Fisher family in the timeline. The results show that Connor will not lose any limbs, and none of the team members have implants. However, Burton would not have survived the war otherwise. All these results indicate that Rye deliberately opened another timeline, at least a decade earlier than previously thought, especially the presence of jackpots. A few moments later, their conversation ended and Ainsley cut off his connection with Flynn. Meanwhile, Ash and Ossing work together to take out the bacteria that is infecting Flynn's brain. However, Lev suddenly comes and finds out about their hidden plan. Ash explains that Alita plans to move the Rye files they stole to Burton's implant and hide them in the past so they can't be traced. However, because Flynn came and disguised himself as Burton, the headset converted the data into bacteria, which began to grow in Flynn's brain. Ash plans to give this data to Neoprim so they can build a new world. Suddenly, Lev wounds Ossing and threatens to prevent them from betraying him. In the present, Tommy returns to the police station and asks for evidence of an accident some time ago. However, strangely, only patrol cars are registered. Because he was suspicious, the young man tracked his car to a landfill and found all the evidence in it, one of which was Sonic's gun. Not long after, he received a call from Sheriff Jackman, who ordered him to go to Corbell's place immediately. Upon arrival at the house, Tommy follows a trail of blood and finds Mary's body while Sheriff Jackman is talking to Corbell. Later, Sheriff Jackman tells Tommy that Robert committed all the crimes. But the man wanted Tommy to catch Burton and Flynn as the perpetrators. Of course, Tommy, who knows all the truth, refuses the sheriff's request. However, Jackman influenced Tommy to believe that the reality of corruption in the police world really existed, and that if he refused the order, Tommy would be fired or arrested. Now, the young man returned to the car and thought about Jackman's words, and then he returned to Corbell's house with the weapon he took from the car and immediately attacked them all. The scene shifts to Ella, who feels like her vision is no longer functioning. She asked Reese for help to take her to the clinic. However, without their realizing it, Robert secretly follows them. Robert injures himself and tricks Reese with an alibi, asking for help, even though he was the one who attacked them and came to create a commotion. Dee Dee and Ella leave the room to check the situation, but Robert threatens them and takes them hostage. The man then took the cell phone from Reese's pocket to send a message. Meanwhile, Burton and his team have returned from the future. They received a message from Reese's cell phone saying that he was at the clinic. They immediately headed to the clinic, but started to get suspicious about words that Reese didn't usually use. This was reinforced by Leon trying to connect with Reese via their implant, but no vital signs were detected. They suspected that Reese was dead, but their suspicions became stronger after they got close enough to the clinic. So Leon tries to connect with Reese's body and makes him move to shoot Robert from inside the clinic. Sometime later, Flynn, Burton, and Connor return to the simulation world. This time, Ainsley offered to cooperate with them, and in exchange, she would prevent the jackpot from appearing in their life timeline. However, before agreeing to the request, Flynn wanted healing for her mother. Instead of getting certainty, Flynn actually experienced great disappointment because they could not seek a cure, and their mother's death was only 23 days away. Meanwhile, Ash, who was starting to betray, went to meet Shiraz and told her that the Rye data she had been looking for was in Flynn's brain. Shiraz then plans to speed up the jackpot in Flynn's timeline in order to eliminate the Fisher family. The scene shifts to Flynn. This time, the girl meets Wilf. They put their minds together and decide to go to Alita's childhood hideout. When they arrived at the place in question, they found the young robot Alita. Alita had been waiting for Wilf's arrival. However, realizing there are spies, Alita asks Flynn to leave. Moments later, the real Alita appears and explains to Wilf that every citizen has an immune brain implant that is used to suppress memories. Because Alita managed to remove the implant, she can easily remember everything. Then, the young robot Alita digs up the ground and finds a skull, She reveals the oligarchs who killed 5 million people in 2 weeks for fear of the plague, including Wilf and Alita's family. At the same time, a group of people arrive, and Alita reveals that she has managed to gather survivors to form Neoprim. Right now, all they needed was the data inside Flynn's brain. Back in the present, Tommy tells Flynn about a warning from Homeland Security regarding a missile attack. The girl intends to stop this plan and asks Connor for help returning to the simulation world to change the system and prevent disaster. Flynn met Ainsley, who told her how to prevent the disaster from happening through one of Ray's additional portals. Soon, Flynn arrived at her destination and was met by guards who tried to stop her. Inside the building, Flynn finds a pocket watch and takes it. However, at the same time, Cherise discovered Flynn's arrival and immediately ordered the guards to attack her. A fierce and extremely chaotic fight was inevitable. After all that, Flynn put the clock on a special panel that could activate the secret portal directly, then destroyed it so that Cherise couldn't find it again. Not long after, Flynn woke up in the present and was walking around the river, and she remembered all the memories with the people she loved. And then, in a matter of 10 seconds, she heard an explosion. And when she opened her eyes, the girl was in a simulation world, the world she was supposed to live in now. And in front of her, a man appeared and asked if they would start working now. That's how this film ends.